Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's done it all, and he's still doing it. Reporter for the New York Post, both before and after Murdoch. The Post's City Hall bureau chief. News director at Channel 5. Press secretary to Ed Koch. One of New York's premier political and communications consultants, a walking encyclopedia, and a master of getting things done. He's George Arzt, president of George Arzt Communications, and he's here to talk about New York City politics, past, present, and future. Welcome, George. It's a pleasure. Before we get to New York politics, let's start with New Jersey politics, and let's start with Chris Christie. Talk about your impressions of the mea culpa and the situation.
No one goes 2 hours without thinking that he's in real trouble. He's obviously in real trouble. Forget about the presidency, but he's in trouble in New Jersey. Who trusts him now? The last poll I read, 54% said that they don't believe him. So you got to say more. This will grow as you get closer, you get closer to him, in the number of aides that have a problem.
Okay, examine it from a political communications perspective, that hour and 47-minute mea culpa. What were the sort of the model good points, and what were some of the pitfalls?
I think he was okay in some of his answers. He went way too long. Mm-hmm. And while he was smooth, didn't go down the slippery slope, as they say. Mm-hmm. He had a real problem in just going on and on with cameras rolling. You take your half hour and you get out of there.
Yeah, and particularly was really pretty strong in the beginning, and then he sort of wandered off, and then he got into the traffic study. So your first rule is say it and shut up and get off the podium.
Make your points and leave.
Okay, now, what would you suggest to him, and I don't want you to be giving free advice, going forward?
I would say going forward, he better find out the trail before investigators do, and exactly who was in charge and who told these people to shut down the lanes.
And you're an historian. I mean, you just look at Watergate. You start low and you keep moving up the chain until you're either at the door or you're in the door.
All that's very true, and I expect that to go pretty high in the Port Authority, and I expect this to go high up in his administration. Ed Koch didn't operate like any other elected official, but the minute something hit the papers that we didn't know about, or we had an inkling about, he would congregate all these people in one room, go around the room, and ask each one what they know about it. I'm sure he did too.
But if he did do that, then he lied.
That's correct. And if he lied, he's in trouble.
And if we look at all these soon-to-be indicted emails and text, you expect to find something like a smoking gun?
They don't have one yet, but I have a feeling there's one out there. There's no way that this went on for 4 days without him knowing it.
Well, 4 days, a couple of months. I mean, two guys resigned from the Port Authority and it doesn't ask any questions. I mean, is it believable at all that he never asked any questions?
I think he asked questions of Wildstein and Kellyanne and all those people. I don't believe that they lied to him.
So, in George Arzt's opinion, he's cooked.
I think he's got serious problems.
Okay. Let's now move on to you in New York City.
Okay.
I listed your jobs. I mean, your resume is...
I couldn't keep a job, yes.
I know. I mean, you moved from job to job to job. What was your favorite job? And why?
I love newspapers. I love to be on a newspaper with deadlines and constantly getting your story in. The idea that you could find something out and it would be on the street in 2 hours. Once when I was on the subway, someone was reading my story. It was on page 3. And I thought to myself, God, I would do this job for nothing.
All right.
I didn't tell that to my boss.
No, I understand that. And I'm of similar feeling with mine. You've often said, though, that the one job or the one activity that you really didn't like was TV.
I didn't like TV because TV never let me drill down, never let me get to everything I wanted to. And the whole idea of leaving out names from the script and not trying to confuse the viewer, it was not my thing.
TV news now, political news now versus then, better, worse, different, how?
I think it's about the same. I just think that TV goes for the headlines.
Right.
And newspapers go for the headlines, but allows you to go down into the details in your story. And I think that's the real difference. I worked harder in newspapers than I did in TV.
Okay. You wrote for 18 years,
Yes.
but you don't write now. Why?
I would like to write. I would like to write books, but I just don't have the time to do it.
When do you write the book? Because that's got to be, that's got to be a bombshell and come on. You
Well,
must have stories.
I have a lot of stories. In fact, many of the Koch people do. I think that John LeCicero is writing a book.
Oh, is he?
Yes, and
Ooh.
and so we sit around, we tell stories, and it was a great administration, the Koch administration, but there was a lot of humor involved.
Oh, yeah, but knowing many of the principles, there was. Okay, you've been called, quote, the man behind the curtain, Sphinx-like, father confessor, and in many ways you are an anomaly. There are a lot of headline-seeking bombasts out there as political consultants. You're different. Why are you sort of always on the side, never up front?
It's me.
It's you.
It's my personality. I'm not a headline seeker. I don't like to be out front, and I'd like to give people advice behind the scenes.
Okay. What does the firm do, George Arzt Communications? I mean, it's really sort of the nexus of politics, government, and media. And if you go to your website, you do PR, government relations, community relations, social media, website design, campaign ads, and you've got a client list, a recent client list that's, come on, it's who's who.
I think we are insiders in politics. We help people navigate government. We help outreach with the city administration and with the community, the community boards. We're sort of guiding all the people to the right people, all the clients to the right people. That's what we do.
Nice, nice. A process broker, if you will, more than a power broker.
Yes, I think that's true. We service our clients to know who the right people to go to for their projects.
Now, among your clients, it would seem to me that outside real estate folks would really need you because the game here is so bizarre that you need insiders. Is that accurate?
Well, they'll probably need me more in the next administration because there'll be great restrictions on the developers.
Okay, I mean, we're gonna transition in a moment, but talk about that specifically.
Well, they're gonna
that
have to,
change.
I think you're going to have to build more affordable housing if you're not building as of right, and I think that's the direction that the de Blasio administration is going.
And how does that impact your real estate clients?
I think before they have a massive project, they're going to have to think about where they're going to build the affordable housing.
And they need folks like you.
Yes.
Okay. Let's get to politics. Favorite race? You've covered how many hundreds of races?
Probably.
Favorite race?
Hillary, 2000.
Ooh, why?
Because we couldn't crack the soccer moms in the city, outside the city, and we went through all sorts of ways to do it, and then finally, her opponent walks over to her on TV,
Rick Lazio,
and says, "Sign this," and Harold Ickes called me and said, "I think we found a way to get these soccer moms."
I mean, talking about political suicide in one act was Lazio's moving across that stage.
But if you remember that the host of the show wasn't much better.
Right. Go ahead.
I think that he just went on and hit her really hard, and it was very difficult.
Yeah, no, I remember. Least favorite race?
Least favorite race?
One you lost, one you won?
It's not always the ones you lose. It's probably judgeships.
Oh, talk about why.
I rarely do judgeships, but judgeships are, I just don't find them compelling. I find the issues, for the larger judgeships, for surrogate, I like those, but, for civil court or Supreme Court.
It's a snooze.
Right.
Okay. Who did you work for this cycle?
We worked for a lot. We worked for Joe Hines and lost.
Ooh.
We worked for Mel Wymore, the first transgender candidate in the city. She lost. We worked for Scott Stringer. He won. We worked for, I can't even remember.
Melinda Katz.
Oh, Melinda Katz. She won.
She won, and I'm trying to think of your client list. Julie Menon.
Julie Menon. She
okay.
lost.
Why not the mayor's race? I mean,
They were all friends.
Ah, because you worked for de Blasio and the public advocate
4 years
race.
ago.
And
I worked for de Blasio. I had a good relationship with Chris Quinn.
Yeah, that would be tough then to do that. And Billy Thompson.
I knew Billy well. I had worked for John Liu. They were all friends.
So you couldn't do it.
I couldn't emotionally do it.
Now, do you do state stuff as well?
Yes.
Okay. Statewide state stuff or local state stuff?
Statewide, sometimes local stuff too.
Okay. So you've covered mayors from who? Lindsay?
I've covered mayors from Lindsay. I've known every mayor since Impellitteri.
You've known everyone, including, I guess it would be Wagner, Lindsay.
Impellitteri, Wagner,
okay.
Lindsay.
Who was the best? I know Ed Koch was the best, but go ahead. Why was Ed Koch the best?
I think that Ed Koch was the best because he really bled for the city. And every decision he made, he wanted it to be right. And he was on top of every major issue. I mean, he used to joke around that if a sparrow died of a heart attack somewhere in the city, it's his fault. But I think he believed it.
Right, and I was a chief of staff for a city councilman when Ed came in, and he would wander City Hall, and just have impromptu press conference. It was a show every day.
Well, the AP reporter, Joe Schoner, a a legend in City Hall, used to tell me, used to beg me when I was press secretary, please, one press conference a day. We don't want any more, please.
I mean, he used to do 5, 6. He used to walk around and
Well,
do
the radiated press conference.
the radio. I mean, I guess the
right.
viewers don't understand. As you walk into City Hall, there are radiators.
Two radiators.
Right, and then everybody congregates
Right.
there. Assessment of the immediately previous mayor, Bloomberg.
I think that Mike was a very good mayor. He was a person who helped stabilize the city after the bombastic Mr. Giuliani. I think that he did well. He knew how to navigate government, and history will look kindly upon him.
But very, very unlike Koch, as you just described him in terms of the engagement, and in the sense he didn't care if the sparrows died.
Well, I think that he had a limited view of the job. Koch, really bled. I don't think he did. And if you remember what was said at the end of his administration, that there was no compassion, that was what the polls said, pretty accurately reflects the administration and hurt his reputation.
Ever worked for a Republican?
I did.
How many?
One.
Who?
John Faso running against someone called Alan Hevesy.
Ooh, in the 2000
Controller race.
Yeah, whatever, 2002 or 2006. Why John Faso?
I knew John Faso. I liked him. He was an honest guy. He's a wonderful guy. And I felt that Alan Hevesy, from the time that I was a reporter all the way through, always lied to me.
And then he turned out to end up in prison.
I did not, of course, know that.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the 2013 election. So in another 10 years, you're looking back and writing your book, and you're writing about the 2013 election. What's the headline? What's the lead?
I would say no one will know Quinn when I'm writing the book, but I would say that de Blasio comes from behind. Quinn collapses.
Weiner mucks up the race.
I don't think that Weiner was ever a serious candidate. That even if Weiner was in, I believe that he would have lost. He would have hurt de Blasio badly.
Yeah, I mean, clearly maybe moved Quinn into a runoff with Thompson, really changed the dynamic of the race. Why de Blasio?
I think that the electorate knew less about him than the others. They found that the others were wanting in qualifications and in their field for them. They felt that Quinn was too close to the mayor, and they wanted a change. There was this dichotomy where 60% of the people felt that Bloomberg had done a good job. 60% also wanted a change.
I know that the polls were a little bit
So if
odd.
you read it wrong,
right?
You were going entirely the wrong way, and I think that he was just someone. Bloomberg was just someone people couldn't figure out, but Quinn definitely did not have. It did not have stamina to last a race.
Okay. Why did the two cities work for de Blasio and, in a sense, not work for Freddie Ferrer either, 8 years earlier or certainly 4 years earlier?
Well, it's always interesting to me because John Del Ciccato, who did the commercials, the famous Dante commercial, was working for Freddie.
Right.
And so they had the two cities, and now the two cities are here again. Perhaps it wasn't time for that sort of delicate statement because it could be viewed as divisive.
Right.
But it's difficult for a Latino to come up with that, or an African American, and now you have a white figure who said it with a biracial family, and it was easier for him to say it and more credible than for an African American or Latino.
Also, it's the context. You have the Great Recession. You have Occupy Wall Street. So the times, they changed.
Stop and frisk.
And stop and frisk, another element of his equality agenda or inequality agenda.
You know, people all knew stop and frisk was out there, right at the top of people's minds. Made all the headlines. And stop and frisk, there was a really inequality, and people thought about their children being stopped. And it just didn't go over well.
Were you surprised, as many people were, at the tone of the inauguration, sort of the first day of the administration? You've got a variety of people, from Harry Belafonte to Reverend Lucas to Tish James. Did that surprise you in terms of a transition?
I think it did. I think people have to learn that the campaign is over, and as Mario Cuomo would say, you're now governing in prose rather than the poetry of the campaign, some of the comments were very harsh, and you have to understand that an inauguration is about renewal and about a new birth of liberty, and not about hitting the last guy.
Okay, so in terms, they had a flawed communication strategy, you might say?
I would say so.
Okay. Looking at the new lineup, you've got a left-leaning mayor, a left-leaning public advocate, a left-leaning council, and a left-leaning council speaker. What does that portend for the city? You mentioned earlier the changes probably in real estate development. What else? What else is out there? What else changes?
I think there'll be more social service announcements and new programs. But I do think that, you know, we go through these cycles where you go from a very liberal administration to a centrist administration to, well, in the case of Giuliani, a right-wing administration.
Right. Okay. Okay. The speaker's race, did it really portend a power shift away from the county leaders to the mayor and away from Queens to Brooklyn? I mean, did we have this tectonic political shift out there that things are changing?
Things change for this time. The county leaders will be back eventually, and I think that clearly, when de Blasio called Frank Sedio and
who was the Brooklyn County Democratic leader,
and asked him to come on board, they did not have a great political relationship in the past. Frank Sedio did not back de Blasio in Brooklyn politics, and also in the mayoralty, and so it was very hard for Frank to turn down the mayor, and so they came on board. And
well, I mean, it must have made him a deal that he couldn't refuse as well.
I think this mayor is in for 4 years. Do you want to be out in the desert for 4 years?
Right, right. Okay. Let's now turn state. De Blasio and Cuomo. I mean, classic mayor-governor conflict. Lindsay Rockefeller, Giuliani, Pataki. Your mayor had probably the best relationship with the governor, Koch and Carey.
Well, they served in the same unit in World War II.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so they went out. In fact, Koch would never talk about it, and you, Carey, did.
But they did have an excellent relationship,
yes.
Certainly during the fiscal crisis.
Yes.
I mean, they worked hand in glove. Well, the previous mayor, Beam, and Carey did not get along because Beam didn't know what was going on, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
And both of them came from the clubhouse in Brooklyn.
Yeah, both of them did. Okay. What do you see about this universal pre-K? I mean, there's two pieces of it: the actual universal pre-K and the tax to get it. I mean, read some tea leaves for me.
Well, I'm someone who envisions how we could get it, and in an election year, it's very difficult for the state to approve a tax. However, there are people working on it for the mayor. Upstate, I just think it's very difficult this year.
Does he get the pre-K but not the tax?
I think they'll have to look at alternatives for funding.
Okay. Macro question. We only have a little less than 2 minutes. What's the biggest change you've seen in your long tenure in political campaigning?
I think it was this election.
So, in what way?
I think that this election was very left, and it moved after 20 years of Republicans, but centrist, the centrist or right governments, to very left government.
What about the actual art and craft of campaigning? Were there any breakthroughs there as well, big changes?
Oh, sure, social media. When I was a reporter, we only had the newspapers.
Right.
Real dominant. We didn't care much about TV. I know Gabe will call in.
Right. Gabe Pressman, go ahead.
But now you have people tweeting and social media, and everything's going out on blogs, and you didn't have that before.
And then in this campaign, I mean, just to bring it back to de Blasio, he didn't do any mailing, which had been a staple. He just used social media.
I was never big on mailing anyway, and I certainly hate robocalls.
Oh.
I really think they're really disturbing.
Okay, we'll end there on a disturbing note. My special thanks to George Arzt for being on the show and for his observations of New York's administrations and for his insight into the art and craft of New York City politics. George, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.tv. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.